What if the Jedi Council didn't fight in the Clone Wars? What would happen then? Let's find out. Synthetic Reverie's final notes reverberated through the curved amphitheater as the 5 band members took their bows to thunderous applause. They departed with casual acknowledgments to the crowd before vanishing into the backstage complex. As the applause died away in the waning daylight, the crowd settled into the comfortable murmur of an audience between acts. The band's departure marked another interval in the marathon celebration that had paralyzed 12 city blocks for 6 relentless days. Roughly 400,000 beings occupied the temporary Colosseum according to their economic standing. The stage itself dominated the central area, a massive 300-meter-wide platform incorporating Monument Plaza's ancient Umaid Peak, the exposed summit of Coruscant's tallest mountain. This last visible remnant of the planet's natural surface now served as the centerpiece of galactic entertainment. Behind this performance platform, an equally vast complex of preparation structures, security zones, and equipment towers stretched another 200 meters into the Federal District. Suspended in the air closest to this spectacle, thousands of luxury pods formed multiple ascending arcs, each precisely angled to optimize sightlines to the stage. Each pod featured a circular design, accommodating 8 guests on plush seating. Holographic control panels along the rim allowed occupants to adjust viewing angles, activate personal climate fields, or summon attendant droids. These premium positions sat mostly empty, their astronomical cost limiting access to core world industrialists and senatorial dynasties, most of whom wouldn't arrive until the event's finale. General admission holders remain barred from these sections, despite the current vacancy. Most attendees clustered in the open admission platforms, positioned beyond the premium arcs, massive floating sections that housed hundreds of seats each, where the stage remained clearly visible despite the greater distance. These general admission seats offered equal access, allowing anyone with a 10-day event pass to claim any available spot within the vast repulsor lift platforms. As the structure rose higher, reaching nearly a kilometer into Coruscant's sky, and direct viewing became impossible, the arc expanded into complete circles, these upper levels relying entirely on massive holographic projections hovering high above the performance area. Coruscant's towers pierced through this arrangement, creating gaps in the seating wherever buildings blocked sightlines. The upper reaches stood nearly vacant, thousands of empty repulsor lift platforms stretching skyward, weaving between towers. These sections would remain sparse until the finale in 4 days, when millions more would flood in to witness the culmination of this 10-day corporate spectacle. That spectacle had grown from season 467 of Galactic Bachelor, which had concluded after 3 years, leaving 3 finalists competing for a trillion-credit prize, and Nexus Broadcasting had transformed the winner announcement into this marathon of sponsored entertainment and merchandise opportunities to capitalize on the show's unprecedented popularity. When the winner was finally revealed, ostensibly determined by audience votes, this temporary structure would reach its full 3 million capacity, transforming Monument Plaza into the epicenter of galactic entertainment. Such a transformation had required unprecedented coordination. Nexus Broadcasting Consortium, the media giant behind Galactic Bachelor, had made this conversion possible through what could generously be called regulatory flexibility. The guidelines existed: environmental impact assessments, structural safety protocols, public access requirements, all neatly cataloged in bureaucratic databases that no one consulted anymore. The real guidelines were simpler. How much were you willing to pay the appropriate officials? The more credits that changed hands, the fewer regulations seemed to apply. For the right price, even Monument Plaza, one of Coruscant's most protected historical sites, could be declared temporarily available for private enterprise. They had committed nearly 8 trillion credits to realize this vision, enough resources to construct entire space stations. But with season 467 reaching over 500 trillion viewers across known space, making it one of the most viewed entertainment programs in galactic history, even disrupting 17 major thoroughfares in the Federal District became acceptable collateral. Every inconvenience, every quantum processor, every specialized repulsor lift array was justified by those staggering audience numbers. The Nexus Broadcasting logo blazed from every available surface: holographic displays, platform railings, structural supports. Its crimson and gold hourglass design as inescapable as the corporate influence that had claimed Coruscant's most sacred historical site. In the studio housed in the preparation complex behind the stage, Kira Preem and Dex Marigan settled into their positions as the live feed switched back from the crowd shots. The 2 humans, Kira in her mid-30s with precisely cropped hair swept back, Dex silver-haired and approaching his 6th decade, wore the expensive professional attire that marked them as Coruscant's media elite. "What a performance from Synthetic Reverie," Kira was saying, her voice delivering the polished enthusiasm of someone who had delivered similar lines thousands of times. For those who missed it, you can catch the full performance on our HoloNet page, already uploaded and trending across the galaxy. Dex adjusted his collar, silver hair showing the subtle signs of someone who had been on camera for days without substantial break. Absolutely spectacular, Kira, but let's talk about what's really got everyone on the edge of their seats. We're 3 days out from the finale, and these vote counts just keep climbing. 37 billion votes in the last hour alone, Kira said, her professional smile never wavering. And folks, you still have time to make your voice heard. Cast your vote on our HoloNet page for whichever finalist has captured your heart. Her tone remained warm and encouraging, carefully avoiding any mention of the transaction fees that would only appear once viewers reached the voting interface. Dex turned slightly toward the camera. "Someone is walking away with 1 trillion credits. The power is completely in your hands." He glanced back at Kira. "Should we remind everyone exactly who they're choosing from?" Kira nodded with her trademark smile, and the feed transitioned from the studio to stylized promotional material featuring the 3 finalists. The graphics were sleek, expensive, each transition engineered for maximum visual impact. The show's electronic theme music pulsed through the broadcast, that same hypnotic rhythm that had become the soundtrack to this marathon celebration, its synthesized bass now as familiar as breathing to anyone who'd been following season 467. HoloNet star Jax Meridian materialized in slow motion, scaling a rain-slicked cliff as electronic wasps swarmed behind him. The 23-year-old's grimace transformed into that signature smile his followers knew so well. His statistics scrolled beneath, over 300 trillion followers, engagement rates that defied mathematical logic. The display shifted seamlessly to Chance Valdris, sprinting through a corridor as explosions erupted behind him. The 32-year-old stood at 6'6", his expensive suit torn and bloodied, but his movements still carried inherited authority even while fleeing mortal danger. His profile scrolled beneath, member of the Valdris shipping dynasty whose annual profits exceeded the GDP of entire star systems, captain of the galaxy's most exclusive racing yacht fleet, and patron of the core world's premier pod racing circuits. Finally, Obi-Wan Kenobi appeared, his robes torn and stained, as he jumped from a high tree branch to land atop a massive, poisonous lizard in a dense forest. "Hello there," he delivered his signature phrase before cracking the creature's skull with a large branch. The footage cut to him meditating motionlessly as a sandstorm raged around his battered form. His credentials scrolled beneath: Jedi Master, Council Member, veteran of 47 diplomatic missions, survivor of encounters with bounty hunters, pirates, and galactic crime syndicates. A resume that read like adventure fiction, but carried the authentication of the Jedi archives. The montage concluded with all 3 finalists standing together atop a barren mountain peak, their hollow eyes and scarred hands telling the story of their ordeal, while graphics of their brutal challenges flashed behind them. Collapsing structures, toxic storms, mechanical death traps. Graphics blazed across the screen. "Who will win?" followed by promotional text counting down to the finale date, building anticipation with every flashing number. The feed returned to the studio where Kira and Dex sat ready to continue coverage. "While we wait for tonight's headliner," Kira began, "here's another look at how our finalists got here." They rolled the same 30-minute recap package they'd aired dozens of times throughout the 6-day marathon, a carefully edited compilation combining the show's early dating drama with what HoloNet forums had taken to calling torture theater disguised as entertainment. That torture theater hadn't been part of the original plan. The show's dramatic transformation in its final 5 months had shocked the galaxy, with audiences speculating wildly about creative decisions and network strategies, though only a handful of boardroom executives knew the real reason behind the format change. Like every season before, it had begun as a typical dating show: manufactured drama, scripted eliminations, and 30 contestants competing for love and credits. As always, the 3 finalists had been predetermined, with the winner supposedly chosen by votes that influenced the decision far less than audiences believed. The selection had been entirely strategic. Jax Meridian represented pure numbers. His over 300 trillion HoloNet followers made him the galaxy's most powerful social media presence. His participation guaranteed unprecedented reach, transforming any content into instant cultural phenomena. Obi-Wan Kenobi's involvement was an entertainment coup. The Jedi Order wielded influence across every major institution, and while they'd licensed their image for countless products and documentaries, no show had ever featured an actual Force wielder as a primary contestant to this extent. When network executives pitched their cultural engagement opportunity, the council agreed enthusiastically. Their eagerness wasn't surprising. The Council Masters craved fame above all else, having watched Anakin Skywalker generate trillions of views with his holotube Force tutorials. Mundane obligations like the Clone Wars, or whatever the news anchors were calling that trade dispute nonsense, seemed irrelevant compared to the Force's clear guidance toward galactic stardom. Every Council Master lobbied for the starring role, but after careful evaluation by both the Order and the show's focus groups, only Obi-Wan possessed the necessary charisma, single status, and, crucially for a scripted romance reality show, sobriety, a rare trait among Jedi. The other Masters settled for cameo appearances and name drops in Obi-Wan's manufactured tragic backstory. Chance Valdress brought nothing to the show itself. His selection was pure corporate horse trading. His older brother, a Nexus Broadcasting executive, had secured Chance's spot among the finalists in exchange for supporting compensation increases that would enrich senior management across the network. Chance pursued this opportunity for calculated reasons. He was one of several heirs competing for the Valdress shipping empire, a Chandrila-based corporation controlling 60% of core world luxury routes, whose current CEO had 5 years at most, according to the best medical droids. With the board preparing to elect a successor, rival heirs pursued traditional strategies of private dinners and boardroom politics. But Chance understood Chandrila's culture better. Public adoration trumped backroom deals. He knew his natural charisma and talent for saying exactly what people wanted to hear would translate perfectly to reality television. 3 years of galaxy-wide fame would guarantee the CEO position was his. For most of the show's run, his strategy worked flawlessly. Production staff, who'd initially dismissed Chance as another nepotism case, watched in surprise as he delivered a perfect performance. The sophisticated businessman with a heart of gold. He became an unexpected fan favorite, his popularity soaring with each episode. That popularity would transform a dating show into hell. His success hadn't gone unnoticed back home. Chance's family rivals watched his rising celebrity with growing alarm, but rather than trying to remove him from the show, they leveraged their considerable wealth and influence to pressure Nexus executives toward format changes that would destroy him from within, circumventing his brother's protection. Under the guise of capturing a broader demographic, they had the show's format shifted toward challenges that would break any pampered heir and expose him as a coward. The strategy was simple. If Chance quit under pressure on galactic television, what board would trust him to lead a trillion-credit shipping empire? They aimed to transform his greatest asset, his newfound fame, into galactic shame and decisive proof of his unfitness for leadership. This pressure crystallized into official policy. Nexus Broadcasting announced the format changes and revised rules. The galaxy's most eligible bachelor would now be chosen based on toughness. The show would now consist of a gauntlet of survival challenges. If multiple contestants completed them all, they would face a public vote. If only one survived the gauntlet, they would win automatically. Crucially, even if all others quit, the remaining contestant must still complete every challenge to claim victory. Behind the scenes, the network abandoned their pre-selected finalist plan. Chance got word through his brother, but could do nothing. Jax and Kenobi learn only when the rules went live galaxy-wide. The timing killed any chance of reversal. Any rollback would scream that the contestants had pulled strings to escape, too terrified to face real danger. The optics were devastating. By the time anyone grasped the full implications, the trap had already sprung. When filming resumed after the standard month-long break, entering the final 5 months of the 3-year production, the 10 remaining contestants found themselves in a nightmare. The champagne dinners and luxury yacht dates had vanished. In their place, the show's producers had crafted challenges worthy of Eriadu's barbaric military selection trials. 7 contestants quit within weeks, later calling themselves the Lucky 7. Only 3 remained, the network's original chosen finalists, now trapped by stakes too high to abandon. Jax's follower count exploded with each survival stream. Quitting would incinerate his adventurer brand and the empire built on that image. Chance knew quitting handed victory to his rivals, delivering the exact humiliation they'd orchestrated. When Obi-Wan contemplated quitting, especially after learning the new rules explicitly forbade Force use during challenges, Yoda claimed a Force vision had revealed trillion-credit merchandising opportunities, but only if he finished the show. The Grand Master warned that abandoning the show would destroy their reputations and the temple's newfound popularity. 5 months of escalating torture followed. They fled swarms of electronic wasps through sodden forests, crossed 170 kilometers of desert without supplies, and faced genetically modified animals whose shock collars prevented killing strikes, but not maulings. The show retained its Galactic Bachelor title, but the galaxy knew better. This was the Galactic Torturer. The final challenge pushed beyond all limits. The 3 contestants, now skeletal shadows of their former selves, had to evade a professional assassin. Armed only with stun weapons, they had to find and neutralize him before he eliminated them with what producers called non-lethal rounds. The rules were simple. If even one contestant fell, the challenge would end, with no winner, no finale, no trillion credits. The assassin moved with chilling professionalism, his focus unnaturally fixed on chance. Facing a professional killer with everything at stake, Obi-Wan devised their survival. He'd serve as bait, while Chance and Jax executed an elaborate trap. It worked, barely. They stunned the assassin, securing their survival as emergency airlifts pulled them from that insect-infested, waterlogged hellscape. The torture was over. Only the live finale and vote announcement remained. The format change meant to break one contestant had instead created the most watched season in the show's 467-season history, placing it among the galaxy's top 10 most viewed programs ever. Season 467's final 5 months held 9 of the show's all-time top 10 episodes across its 500-year run. The lone exception at 4th place was episode 23 of season 34, when a stimulant-fueled contestant murdered 20 people. Success had already found all 3 survivors. Jax had monetized the entire experience, building investment portfolios and business empires that would sustain his descendants for generations, his influence exploding during those final brutal months. Chance's endurance demolished his family rivals. His popularity on Chandrila now untouchable, the CEO position his for the taking. Obi-Wan's suffering had made the Jedi Temple a merchandising juggernaut, with Baby Yoda products alone generating trillions in revenue. In 4 days, one of them would claim an additional trillion credits. They'd already paid for it in blood, suffering, and sanity. The only question was, whose torture had been most entertaining? The recap package Kira and Dex had introduced reached the segment where Obi-Wan discussed his entirely fabricated underdog journey within the Order. Trillions across the galaxy absorbed every word, and in the Jedi Council chamber, Yoda watched his colleague's performance on his datapad until an urgent notification slid down from the top of the screen, a priority message from Palpatine's office. Yoda drew upon the Force to maintain his composure, the ancient meditation technique being the only barrier between his frustration and the datapad's inevitable destruction. He tapped the notification. The Bachelor broadcast paused as he navigated to the full message and began reading the Chancellor's latest demands. The late afternoon chamber hosted a sparse gathering. Master Shakti, Mace Windu, Kit Fisto, and Plo Koon had claimed their official seats, while Anakin occupied Obi-Wan's vacant chair, a position he'd commandeered throughout his former master's 3-year absence. Though filming had wrapped over a month ago, Obi-Wan remained trapped at event headquarters for finale preparations, promotional shoots, sponsor obligations, and endless media appearances that kept all 3 finalists away from their normal lives. In the quiet chamber, sleep had overtaken most of the Jedi, except Anakin and T, both absorbed in their datapads. She scrolled through her holonet feed, while Anakin watched a holo-series about a serial killer who worked as a tax recovery agent, the bizarre premise completely captivating him. "Wake up! All of you must." Yoda's voice erupted across the chamber after he finished parsing Palpatine's message, shattering the peaceful atmosphere like a sonic charge. Tee's head snapped up from her datapad, while Anakin emerged from his crime drama trance. The sleeping master stirred with expressions ranging from mild annoyance to profound confusion. "Palpatine, Palpatine and whatever his name is, demands another meeting with you, young Anakin." The declaration's effect was immediate and predictable. Everyone in the chamber except Anakin returned to their previous occupations, their brief interest extinguished upon learning the summons excluded them. Anakin buried his face in his left palm while his right hand maintained its grip on the datapad, the screen frozen at exactly 20 minutes and 14 seconds into the 8th episode, titled Tax Refund. The tax agent's hand hovering over the senior auditor's door, the missing receipts folder clutched in his other hand. When Anakin spoke, his muffled voice carried the weariness of someone perpetually inconvenienced by galactic politics. "What does he want now? We just rescued him from Dooku's latest episode." Mace Windu chuckled without opening his eyes. When Dooku and General Grievous had abducted the Chancellor from his Senate office the day before, Anakin and Yoda treated the mission as prime content material, live streaming the entire rescue and garnering trillions of views across the holonet. The former Jedi's motives remained unclear. Perhaps extortion, though dementia seemed equally plausible, given his increasingly erratic behavior since departing the Order. What lent credence to the latter theory was Dooku's conduct during the actual confrontation. The Count had dueled Yoda with his usual intensity, then abruptly paused mid-swing, his expression shifting to one of confused recognition. He lowered his lightsaber and smiled warmly at his former master, addressing him with the respectful tone of a devoted apprentice who had forgotten the decades between them. Yoda, never one to waste an advantage, had promptly cut him down while his head-mounted bodycam live-streamed the entire execution. Back in the present situation, Kit Fisto offered practical advice without opening his eyes. Maybe Palpatine has a sponsorship opportunity for your channel, Anakin. I hear the Senate's launching some aid recruitment campaign. For this sponsorship, charge him much you must, Anakin, Yoda warned with the authority of someone who had dealt with politicians for centuries. Try to pay you in exposure, he will. Right then, Yoda's personal chronometer chimed precisely at 1800 hours, the sacred beginning of their nightly entertainment schedule. Time for the club it is, he announced, tapping his wrist chronometer to silence the chime and rousing the drowsing masters once more. Anakin, handle the Chancellor's business tomorrow, you can. Important it cannot be. To the club we must go. The young Jedi Knight nodded absently. Credits aside, he wanted nothing to do with Palpatine, though something about that reluctance felt like swimming against a current that sought to carry him in a specific direction. As the group departed for their evening revelries, the chamber's automatic systems engaged, sealing the great doors behind them. 12 empty seats arranged themselves in their eternal circle, each one a silent sentinel, bathed in the dying light that bled through ancient transparent steel. The chamber's temperature dropped perceptibly as darkness crept across the floor like spilled ink. From within the suffocating gloom, Coruscant's cityscape transformed through the vast windows, millions of lights becoming cold, unblinking eyes that stared into the chamber's darkness. The darkness stared back, formless shadows, patient as death itself, seething with dissatisfaction at the unfolding chaos that defied all cosmic design. That night, Anakin's dreams carried him through impossible geometries. He found himself fleeing from younglings wielding crimson lightsabers, their small faces twisted with malevolent purpose. As they closed in around him, a hand burst through the wall beside him, grasping his wrist and pulling him through the barrier into darkness. He emerged in a stark, pencil-sketch dimension where everything existed in black and white lines. The young man who had rescued him stood before him, singing with a reassuring expression. Beside them, a rotund figure looked around, clearly disoriented by the sketched surroundings. A synthesized melody filled the space, its hypnotic beat compelling movement. Despite the strangeness of it all, Anakin found himself dancing to the rhythm, as did the shorter one, their movements both natural and surreal in this drawn world. The peaceful moment shattered when two hydrospanner-wielding pursuers materialized in the sketched landscape. His rescuer grabbed Anakin's hand, Anakin grasped the rotund figure's arm, and together they ran through corridors that bent like comic panels, the music echoing around them. Cornered at a dead end, they separated. His rescuer and the other figure dove toward the side walls while Anakin hurled himself backward through the wall behind them. Anakin's impact tore through the sketched barrier, sending him tumbling into a chasm where visions flashed past like falling fragments. Yoda weeping from smoking something too strong, Master Windu jumping out a window, Padme screaming about something incomprehensible. He landed atop a speeder with Padme beside him, her hands offering a container of sweetened bantha crisps, as they both watched Tusken camps consumed by flames below, the savage animals running in circles, while ablaze. Anakin found himself enjoying the spectacle. "How much did all this cost?" he asked Dream Padme. "I don't know. You're the one who paid," she replied. He checked his datapad. His bank account was empty, completely drained, the numbers bleeding from the screen like digital wounds. The sight sent a jolt of terror through him. He woke, gasping, his throat parched. Rather than disturb Padme, he stumbled toward the veranda, passing Dorme in the hallway. Or perhaps not, his half-asleep mind couldn't be certain, though he vaguely recalled someone offering a fist bump that he'd returned. The small fountain beckoned from the veranda. The cold water went down harshly as he drank too quickly, sending sharp pain through his chest. He settled onto the nearby seating, rubbing the discomfort until it subsided. "Did you drink from that?" Padme asked, materializing from the apartment's interior and nodding toward the fountain. Her sleeping gown flowed like liquid starlight, one hand resting protectively over her midsection. "Yeah?" Anakin replied after a slight pause. "The whole piping system underneath is probably corroded. You just drank rust juice." "Well, if I die from drinking fountain water, so be it." Anakin leaned back, his left hand still resting lightly on his chest as he studied her face. What should I say at the eulogy? Padme asked, her tone utterly flat. Something that sounds profound, but makes no sense. The kind of thing no one questions because they don't want to look stupid, Anakin said. Padme walked toward him. I'll say you spoke little, but said much. She noticed him still rubbing his chest slightly. You could have just asked me for water. I had a bad dream. Wasn't really thinking clearly, he admitted. What did you see? She asked, resting her head on his shoulder as she sat beside him. Can't remember most of it. Fire, Tuscans. My bank account got drained. Then I screamed and woke up. Oh, and you were screaming too about something. Maybe my account got drained as well. That would explain the screaming. Anakin snorted with amusement, then immediately grimaced as the metallic taste from the fountain water hit him. Padme gave him an amused but sympathetic laugh, the kind reserved for watching someone discover their own poor judgment. He shifted his gaze outward, seeking distraction from the unpleasant sensation lingering in his mouth. Somewhere deep in the entertainment sector, near Monument Plaza, a massive holographic projection cycled through the 3 bachelor finalists' faces, far enough from Padme's apartment that the morning mist turned the display into a blurry sequence of shifting colors and vague features. Padme's eyes followed his gaze to where Obi-Wan's face was dissolving into Jax's, then transitioning to Chan's before starting the loop again. Who's going to win that torture show? Padme asked. Not a clue. The votes might affect it, but if you ask me, they'll choose whoever generates the most controversy, more arguments, more engagement. Oh, Padme nodded, unsurprised. Her expression fell slightly as she remembered she wouldn't be able to join him at the finale due to the shipping deal. Anakin wrapped both arms around her, pulling her closer as they looked at each other for a quiet moment. You sure you can't make it to the finale? He asked softly. Doesn't look like it. Our meeting with the Baron can't be rescheduled. Her tone carried obvious irritation as she leaned into his embrace. The Baron, Anakin said, adopting a mocking aristocratic accent for the title before returning to his normal voice. Who is that guy anyway? Baron Valen Rudor Kent Hammertong III of House Malteravos Keldanis, some ancient noble who's 102 years old, according to Bale. Padme shook her head, clearly unwilling to discuss the living relic. He needs to personally sign off on a shipping agreement we're interested in. Apparently, he's the only family member with legal authority. These are the types of people I have to deal with, Anakin. Honestly, some days I think the Senate building is more asylum than government. Maybe you should just burn the whole place down, Anakin suggested. After blocking all the exits, Padme added without hesitation. They both laughed. Only because I'm so in love, Padme said suddenly, the words appearing without conscious intention. No, because I'm so in love with you, Anakin replied, equally surprised by his automatic response. Another moment of displacement passed between them, as if they were actors who had forgotten their scripted lines and were improvising something dangerous. They smiled uncertainly, recognizing the strangeness of their exchange, and decided to return to bed. Above them, ancient presences stirred in dimensions where geometry went mad, their attention fixed on patterns that refused to align. Chancellor Palpatine's office hadn't changed since Anakin's last visit, the same oppressive crimson decor that triggered migraines within minutes. He'd arrived hoping to discuss Hollow 2 partnerships, but those hopes evaporated the moment Palpatine began speaking. The Chancellor deflected Anakin's inquiries about promotional opportunities, steering instead toward his perpetual grievances, how the Council was somehow working against Anakin. These arguments seemed to originate from some alternate reality. Anakin practically lived in the Council chamber these days, a habit that had intensified during Obi-Wan's 3-year absence. The Masters treated him as an equal despite his unofficial status, yet Palpatine persisted with his bizarre narrative of institutional persecution. The elderly politician's deteriorating mental faculties made arguments seem cruel, so Anakin maintained his usual strategy, agreeable murmurs while calculating escape routes. Today, however, Palpatine's delusions reached new heights of absurdity, as his rambling took an especially bizarre turn. I need you to be the eyes, ears, and voice of the Republic. Anakin, I'm appointing you to be my personal representative on the Jedi Council. Anakin took a moment to process when Palpatine clarified, this will streamline communications regarding our military operations. Military operations, Anakin thought, presumably something to do with that whole Clone War nonsense that some pretended was important. The entire mess remained a mystery to Anakin, who'd never bothered learning his origins, trade disputes, taxation disagreements, some other tedious political theater. The Council showed equally minimal interest, deploying a few knights to babysit clone battalions, only after Palpatine fast-tracked their temple budget increases. As Padme had observed, the Chancellor seemed unusually eager to deploy Jedi to the field. though no one cared enough to investigate why. As far as Anakin was concerned, he'd done his part. He and Yoda had rescued Palpatine and executed that old man Yoda said was bad. That should have ended things. Yet Grievous persisted in playing soldier, his motivations utterly opaque and thoroughly uninteresting to Anakin. The cyborg should have been dead too, but Yoda had insisted that throwing him out an airlock would make for better content than a simple lightsaber execution. More dramatic for the viewers, it will be, he'd said, dismissing Anakin's warnings about this Grievous thing looking mostly machine and likely to survive in space. When news arrived that the general had survived the vacuum of space, Yoda acted completely shocked. Who could have known? And Anakin hadn't cared enough to point out the obvious. Now, faced with Palpatine's rambling about military operations and council representation, Anakin felt that same indifference washing over him. He agreed to whatever Palpatine required and departed for the temple. When Anakin returned to the council chamber and relayed the encounter, Plo Koon immediately identified the subtext. So he wants you to spy on us with all that eyes and ears business? Seems like it, Anakin confirmed. The Masters exchanged glances, recognizing the absurdity. Even if Anakin agreed to espionage, which he clearly wouldn't, his reports would consist of club reviews, streaming recommendations, and detailed accounts of their recreational chemistry experiments. Nothing remotely classified. Does this make me officially on the council? Anakin asked. Mace and the others nodded with casual indifference. The council had always operated with a mix of permanent appointments and rotating positions. Some masters held lifetime seats, while others cycled through based on availability and whim. They'd boot Quinlan Vos from whatever temporary position he'd supposedly held, since nobody could determine if he even knew he was on the council, given that he'd attended precisely one meeting during his mysteriously lengthy tenure. Since Anakin already occupied his former master's chair and actually bothered showing up, formalizing his presence seemed like the path of least resistance. A Padawan would be assigned to handle the paperwork, ensuring it would vanish into administrative oblivion. Whether the appointment was temporary or permanent was a distinction nobody particularly cared to make. As the group settled back into their recreational activities, Anakin wondered aloud if the appointment made him a master. Windu started to confirm, then hesitated, and turned to Yoda, who was absorbed in browsing luxury holosites, selecting formal attire for the finale in 3 days. Give a shit. I do not, Yoda muttered, scrolling through luxury robes. Mace shrugged. Sure, Master Skywalker it is. The conversation immediately shifted to lunch plans. They ended up at a high-rise restaurant overlooking the entertainment district, where holographic promotions for the Galactic Bachelor finale had reached fever pitch. The next night, with 1 day remaining until the finale, the Jedi Council had commandeered an entire floor of an upscale club in the Senate District, where holographic art installations cycled through abstract patterns against obsidian walls. The venue's exclusivity matched their sense of importance. Private booths arranged around a central dance floor, sound dampeners creating intimate conversation zones, while bass frequencies pulsed through reinforced flooring. Several knights had joined the evening's festivities, their presence transforming the council's recreational gathering into something resembling a professional convention with premium liquor and significantly less professional behavior. All the Jedi wore expensive designer attire they favored for such outings, partly from genuine appreciation of luxury, partly to avoid the constant stream of autograph seekers and earnest inquiries about Jedi recruitment that their traditional robes inevitably attracted. Anakin, seated on the bar counter, found himself deep in explanation about his latest content strategy, gesturing with his half-empty glass of brandy as he broke down the analytics. At the end of the day, it's all supply and demand, he continued, the expensive drink making every insight feel profound. But ever since I made my holovids longer, engagement's been through the roof, and masterclass purchases are up 30%. He scrolled through metrics on his datapad with unsteady fingers. The HoloTube algorithm rewards viewer satisfaction, so if you can keep people hooked for those extra minutes while actually teaching them something. He looked up from his datapad to find Barriss Offee watching him, chin resting on her hand, a soft smile playing on her lips. Her glass sat nearly empty. The temple's explosive specialist hadn't said much in the last several minutes, probably absorbing all these technical details. You following all this? He asked, wanting to make sure his friend understood the nuances. She murmured, that soft smile never wavering. Keep going, it's fascinating. She folded her left arm beneath her head and rested it on the polished counter, gazing up at him with the kind of wonder typically reserved for rare Elam frost blossoms, those crystals that bloom for mere moments before the cold claimed them. She must have been overwhelmed by all this data and needed to rest her head, Anakin understood. He shifted his datapad onto the counter, angling the screen for better visibility, but instead of studying the valuable insights, she kept her gaze locked on his face. Strange, considering that at 21, Barriss, like most Jedi, had her share of business investments and knew the importance of maximizing revenue streams outside the temple allowance, which, while more than sufficient, ultimately depended on Senate approval. These strategies he was sharing could boost her revenue streams immensely, yet here she was, staring at him instead of the screen. Perhaps she processed information better through listening rather than reading. That made sense. Anakin launched back into his explanation. As he detailed optimal editing techniques for holovids, her right hand drifted upward, fingers threading slowly through his hair before trailing down to rest against his jaw. Clearly something was stuck in his hair, or perhaps on his face, that required attention. Anakin appreciated Barriss looking out for him. Good friends always ensured each other remained presentable. Confident she was still absorbing the information while handling whatever was on his face, he tapped the screen to display viewer retention graphs. Barriss's palm remained pressed against his jaw, her thumb tracing gentle circles across his skin before brushing along his lower lip. He was just launching into subscriber retention strategies when Palpatine's official seal blazed across the display, that insufferable crimson stamp demanding immediate attention. Anakin buried his face in his hands, elbows braced against the counter's edge. What does he want now? He muttered through his palms. Barriss finally glanced at the datapad while Anakin looked away, as if avoiding eye contact with the device might make it cease to exist. She lifted her head unsteadily, her coordination compromised by the night's libations as she reached for the device. Her finger struck the display with imprecise force, opening Palpatine's communication more clumsily than her intended delicate touch. She squinted at the display, her words slurred. Galaxy's Opera House, Private Box 7. Immediate conference required. The Chancellor's summons barely registered before her eyes lit up with sudden interest. The Opera House? She grabbed Anakin's arm, nearly toppling from her perch. We have to go. We might see some celebrities. I want to know if they really look like they do in the Hollows. This seemed reasonable enough. The Galaxy's Opera House stood as Coruscant's crown jewel of culture, where actors and musicians gathered nightly. Ostensibly, they came for the art. In reality, everyone knew it was about being photographed, looking sophisticated for tomorrow's entertainment feeds. Barry, I can barely stand up, Anakin protested weakly. Anakin, her hold tightened with drunken enthusiasm. 21 years on Coruscant, and I've never been inside the Opera House. Do you know how exclusive that place is? And don't worry, I have something for our clarity situation. She winked knowingly. The alcohol had clearly scrambled her priorities. Sober Barriss cared about explosives research and technical specifications, not velvet robes and VIP sections. But several rounds of premium spirits had apparently rearranged her interests. Anakin sighed, recognizing defeat when he saw it. Between Palpatine's political weight and Barriss's liquor-fueled celebrity obsession, resistance was pointless. The night had clearly chosen its own direction. For f***'s sake, fine, let's go, Anakin said, sliding off the seat and pocketing his datapad. He caught Yoda's attention on the dance floor with exaggerated gestures, pointing between himself and Barriss, then toward the exit, all while Barriss held onto his other arm. Most of the other masters had succumbed to various stages of intoxication in the venue's darker corners, but Yoda moved with remarkable velocity to some outer rim track whose lyrics remained foreign to Anakin's core world sensibilities. Yoda's vigorous thumbs up, delivered without breaking rhythm, suggested either comprehension or complete indifference to their departure. Minutes later, their AI-guided luxury speeder, one of the temple's fleet, glided through Coruscant's elevated traffic lanes, weaving between slower craft as automated systems managed the route. Barriss produced a small electronic vial of premium Nar Shaddaa spice from her jacket, high-grade stimulant that would shred through alcohol's haze in minutes. She tapped a line onto the back of her hand, snorted it in one smooth motion, then passed the vial to Anakin. He fumbled slightly with his own hand, the alcohol making him careless, before managing a decent line and snorting it, then rubbing the residue across his gums. The rush hit immediately, burning through the night's intoxication as the speeder continued its journey. By the time they reached the Opera House's private landing bay, their thoughts ran sharp and clear, the alcohol fog completely gone. As they exited the speeder at the VIP landing platform, Barriss glanced around with quick, restless movements. The drug had burned away her earlier drunken enthusiasm for celebrity spotting, but they were already here. They traversed the private entrance corridor, moving across marble that had witnessed centuries of Coruscant's elite. As they emerged into the main foyer, where the grand staircase swept upward like a gilded promise, Anakin moved to ascend, but found himself tethered. Barriss had caught his hand in hers. The stimulants had sharpened every sensation. He could feel her pulse, where their palms pressed together, rapid as a humming peeper's wings. He turned back, then gave her hand a gentle pull. "Let's go, you're the one who wanted to see celebrities." Something shifted behind her eyes, that bright, chemical clarity giving way to an emotion he couldn't parse. "Perhaps we could just remain here, walk the outer galleries?" Anakin looked puzzled, glancing around the ornate space. "You want to walk around down here?" She nodded. "Sure, you do that. I'll be quick," he assured her. "Whatever Palpatine wants can't take long. Then we'll go, okay?" She nodded, but her grip remained, as if his hand were the only solid thing in a world gone liquid at the edges. "Barriss?" He glanced down at their joined hands, a fond smile touching his lips. She released him with the reluctance of someone surrendering a weapon. What a considerate friend, clearly concerned the stimulants might overwhelm him in the opera house's labyrinthine interior. Even knowing a Jedi's force-enhanced tolerance for such substances, she worried. Such thoughtfulness. "Try not to blow anything up," he called, taking the stairs 2 at a time. "Do or do not, there is no—" she began, but he'd already vanished into the upper reaches, unhearing. "Try," she finished to the empty air, the word tasting of disappointment and stimulant residue. Alone, Barriss drifted through the opera house's opulent corridors, eventually finding herself at a balustrade overlooking the city. The spice rendered everything hyper-real. Coruscant revealed itself as nothing more than a colossal advertising projection, each building a screen, each screen a lie. Even the air tasted wrong, metallic exhaust mixed with the bitter aftertaste of promises no one intended to keep. Then, a disturbance in the Force. No simpler than that. Eyes, multiple sets, their judgment shattering her focus. She turned with the deliberate slowness of a Thurnby, realizing Bonbrax had decided to assert dominance. Her expression settled into perfect blankness as she faced them, her voice flat as Durasteel. "See something interesting?" Anakin navigated the opera house's serpentine upper levels, climbing multiple staircases and traversing endless corridors lined with gilded portraits of long-dead Coruscanti nobility. The journey to Palpatine's private viewing box seemed deliberately designed to exhaust visitors before they even arrived. Outside those elaborate doors to the box, Anakin paused to gather his energy for whatever political nonsense awaited him. He hoped he wouldn't have to use the Chancellor's actual name. The very anxiety of potentially forgetting it had scrambled his thoughts, leaving him with only Palpatine or Papa Valentine floating in his mind. He entered to find Palpatine watching the performance below, Mon Calamari Opera, their bubble aria style unmistakable even from the corridor. As Palpatine turned in his seat to greet him, Anakin knelt to the Chancellor's level, bringing them face to face as Palpatine spoke in low tones. Clone intelligence has located Grievous on Utapau. Clone intelligence. Anakin had always found those 2 words amusing when placed together. He arranged his features into what he hoped resembled enthusiasm, though the expression came out more like someone trying not to sneeze. "That's good news, Chancellor." From this angle, Palpatine's eyes caught the faint powder residue on Anakin's sleeve, the telltale dusting that marred his otherwise immaculate Naboo silk. "Entertaining evening, my boy?" Anakin rose immediately, ignoring the inquiry. "I'll inform the Council. This requires immediate action," he said, injecting enough military urgency into his tone to avoid seeming rude as he moved toward the exit. Better to appear overeager about the mission than to sit through another sermon from Palpatine. He departed quickly, and Palpatine observed his retreat with the cold patience of a Vixus, whose prey had slipped through its tentacles. As Anakin navigated back toward the main staircase, his comlink buzzed insistently from his jacket pocket. He pulled out the device just as he turned the corner. Before he could even check the display, Barriss appeared as if she'd been searching for him, her hand clamping onto his left arm with surprising force. "Don't answer that, it's me calling," she said, already propelling him toward the stairs at a pace much quicker than his leisurely approach. Only then did Anakin look at the display. Barry flashed across it, complete with 7 red hearts and her photo, the entire contact entry she'd set up herself. The heart still puzzled him, given her specialization as a healer, and considering that cardiovascular failure was the leading cause of Jedi becoming one with the Force, he'd always assumed it was her thoughtful way of reminding him to watch his diet and maintain proper cardio conditioning. He declined the call and turned his spice-sharpened attention to her, recognizing that particular manic energy radiating off her. Something had either gone very wrong or very right. "What happened?" he asked as they moved through the Opera House's elaborate passages. Her words came in rapid, clipped sentences. "I was just wandering around, ended up on some upper level. 6 ancient fossils all stared at me like they'd never seen another sentient before." "Then?" he asked as they descended the grand staircase, already knowing no Jedi would let that kind of disrespect pass unanswered. One of them, some crone, called me sweetie and suggested I might be more comfortable in the general seating areas. Barriss's jaw tightened. I could taste her thoughts. The disdain old bloodlines reserve for the recently wealthy. Those tragic specimens who'd dare use the dessert fork for appetizers. Her eyes narrowed. Calcified parasites addressing a Jedi master like some moisture farmer who struck a plasma vein. Her fury wasn't just about the insult. It was about disrespecting a rank she'd earned by passing the hardest trial of them all. Master Ophi had earned that title through the trial of incarceration, wherein any Jedi apprentice or knight sentenced to prison automatically ascended to Master upon release. A notably difficult trial to pass, given that a Jedi would have to commit something truly heinous to face imprisonment, despite their legal immunity. She'd received 6 months for what the Holonet delicately termed the Trade Federation Conference incident. The facts were straightforward. 34 Neimoidian representatives, 1 thermal detonator, 1 conference room with remarkably secure locks. The case only reached trial due to Federation Senate representation, though witnesses developed an unfortunate tendency to disappear before testimony. Everyone knew the Jedi were ensuring silence, but to settle Federation unrest and allow them to save face, Barriss received a token sentence. The news holos could proclaim a Jedi had been imprisoned for the incident, carefully omitting the term, while the story would fade from feeds by her release. She'd served 2 months before earning early release for good behavior, the official euphemism for when her cell block's mortality rate began climbing precipitously. The temple had lobbied force-related crimes out of legal existence centuries ago, leaving administrators in an impossible position. They couldn't prove force involvement, couldn't file additional charges, and certainly couldn't risk keeping her any longer. Per ancient tradition, the council promoted her to Master upon release. Luminara Anduli reportedly wept with profound joy, though not for the reasons anyone assumed. Having taken a Padawan solely for the extra temple allowance, Luminara had abandoned Barriss to learn from training droids, leading her to develop a coping mechanism during those isolated years, an enthusiasm for explosives. Now Luminara could claim credit for a Padawan who jumped from apprentice to master, skipping night entirely without having taught her anything. Barriss hadn't acknowledged her former master's existence since that elevation a year ago. And after earning her title through prison and isolation, she'd be damned if some withered aristocrat would dismiss her like common rabble. "The way that woman looked at me," Barriss continued, her fingers flexing with deliberate control, "like I'd track mud across their pristine marble." Her voice shifted, controlled fury giving way to barely suppressed excitement. "So for their crime of judgment, they had to pay. I took out one of my special miniature charges and suggested," the emphasis telegraphed force persuasion, "it was a youth restoration crystal. Told them it would only activate if they all held it together, somewhere private and quiet." Anakin was still processing the implications, formulating his response, when they stepped onto the red-carpeted walkway leading to the parking structure. A muffled thump sounded from somewhere above, contained but unmistakable, followed by distant shouting. Barriss burst into delighted laughter, sharp and clear. She spat on the carpet. "There's your funeral rites, insect scum." Anakin closed his eyes and exhaled sharply through his nose, now burdened with yet another complication to manage. Without breaking stride, Barriss tugged his hand closer as 6 distinct presences winked out of the force like extinguished flames. "Were you spotted? Any cameras?" Anakin asked, his mind immediately zeroing in on operational concerns. Barriss shook her head with the dismissive confidence of someone who'd actually paid attention during stealth training. Master Hyde-Dab Bodhi's 4th principle, when the Force guides action in shadow, let no artificial eye bear witness. She delivered the ancient tactical doctrine with the reverence of reciting scripture. That section maintains no surveillance. Privacy laws protecting the ultra-wealthy from their own paranoia most likely. Wouldn't have acted otherwise. She held him tighter as Coruscant Security Force speeders screamed toward the Opera House, her respiration carrying that telltale rapid cadence of chemical euphoria mixed with professional satisfaction. Anakin almost asked why she hadn't simply suggested they step over a railing, cleaner, quieter, less theatrical. Then he caught himself. Every Jedi developed their own signature for when the Force demanded justice. His own preference ran toward telekinetic cranial compression. Mundi favored immolation. Yoda had that disturbing fondness for releasing those hungry Ewok creatures in confined spaces. Barriss clearly preferred the artistry of controlled combustion. She didn't let go until they'd reached the parking section and climbed into their speeder. As their vehicle lifted off, more CSF speeders screamed toward the Opera House, where a thin stream of smoke now rose from the upper levels. Barriss burst into sharp, exhilarated laughter, the sound of someone who'd carried out the Force's will in perfect harmony with cosmic justice. "Play something upbeat and drop the windows," she commanded the automated speeder. "Of course," it replied, selecting a track whose lyrics spoke of feeling like an animal when losing control. The windows descended with a soft whir. Anakin watched the Opera House recede through his window, cataloging everything he was leaving behind. Palpatine, explosions, the whole festering mess of the night. He kept his eyes on the structure as their speeder climbed through the traffic lanes, tracking its diminishing form until the angle of their ascent finally pulled it from view. The golden Jedi Order emblem on their speeder's rear, where registration tags would normally be displayed, had caught the Opera House's fading reflection, the building growing smaller, the smoke becoming a faint smudge, until the emblem showed only the endless cityscape of Coruscant. When he turned forward once more, Barriss had already brought the back of her left hand to her face, the line of Nar Shaddaa stimulant vanishing in one swift inhalation. She promptly traced another line across the same surface and offered her hand to him. He took her offered left hand in his right, lowering his head to inhale the powder, the familiar chemical burn racing through his sinuses and igniting his bloodstream. The speeder ascended through Coruscant's layered traffic, and Barriss maintained her grip on his hand, unwilling to sever the connection. She shifted to study him, truly study him, while the wind transformed their hair into wild tangles, and the city's endless lights swam in her expanded pupils. Music drifted through the cabin with the rushing air, another layer in the night's sensory symphony. The weight of her scrutiny pressed against him with such intensity that Anakin wondered if crystalline residue still dusted his features. His free left hand moved reflexively, brushing across cheek and nose. "All gone?" The question emerged, uncertain. Silence was her only response as she drew his captive right arm toward her. Her gaze never wavered from his face as she maneuvered herself onto his lap, settling sideways across his legs. From this new vantage, she tilted her face up toward his, something raw and unguarded flickering in her expression. Operating on instinct, Anakin's arms encircled her to provide stability, his right palm finding its way to cradle her face. A shuddering exhale escaped her as she sank into the touch, the side of her face settling into his palm as though she'd been waiting her entire life for that exact point of contact. Her seat must have been uncomfortable, Anakin reasoned. It would be rude not to accommodate her. And fortunately, he knew exactly how to keep someone stable on his lap. He'd learned that particular skill during those supply runs, when Yoda insisted on piloting. The Grandmaster's erratic flying sent everything wobbling, while Anakin desperately balanced 20-kilo spice bags on his lap, developing an iron grip to keep his cargo from tumbling to the cabin floor. The same principle applied here, whether securing contraband or steadying a person. Barriss lifted her left hand, placing it gently over his where it rested against her face. Her fingers trembled as they covered his, her eyes fluttering closed. Then with a soft, unsteady breath, she let herself fall forward onto his chest, still holding his hand against her face, her ear finding the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. The gesture's meaning was obvious to Anakin. She was monitoring his cardiovascular response to the stimulants. As a healer, she'd naturally want to ensure the powder hadn't pushed his heart rate into dangerous territory. Even intoxicated herself, she maintained that professional vigilance. What a remarkably considerate friend she was proving herself to be, time and again. "Anakin," Barriss murmured against his chest, her voice soft and unguarded. "Barry," he responded gently. She pulled back to look up at him, her face still pressed against his hand. "Look at me," she said. He did. Perhaps she wanted to know if there was anything on her face. He examined her carefully. Her eyes held something raw and desperate, pupils dilated beyond what the stimulants alone would cause, searching his face as though she might find salvation there. Her lips parted slightly, trembling with words that seemed trapped behind them. The vulnerability in her expression was almost painful to witness, like watching someone stand at the edge of a precipice, gathering courage to leap. But examining her face with careful attention, he found no trace of powder anywhere. He opened his mouth to report this finding when, "I want you," Barriss spoke in a hushed tone, holding his gaze with those impossibly wide eyes. The way she looked at him, it pulled him in like a tractor beam. He understood completely. The intensity there, the way her breath came in short, shallow pulls. He leaned down, she tilted up toward him, their lips nearly meeting. "Barry," Anakin began. "Yeah?" "The doctrine of Master Iwan Chu is quite extensive, and we've only got about 20 minutes before we reach the club." The speeder had gained considerable speed, wind roaring through the cabin. He had to lean in even closer to ensure she heard him clearly. "How about I explain it properly later?" The sound that escaped her defied classification, laughter and sob tangled together, joy indistinguishable from devastation. "Later, then." She turned her face away before sinking back against his chest. "I'll hold you to that, Anakin." "Good, it's important material," Anakin assured her, drawing her closer. She laughed again, definitely laughter this time, her fingers reaching up to tousle his hair before giving his chest a small headbutt. Then she finally stilled against him. Such dedication to the ancient teachings. He was fortunate to have a friend who shared his scholarly interests, though her amusement puzzled him. Master Chu's doctrine was serious material. The legendary Jedi who'd lost both arms in combat, then strapped blasters to the stumps, and decimated entire battalions with his revolutionary severed limb firearm technique. Losing your limbs and having to graft weapons in their place, Anakin mused. What a wretched way to exist. As their speeder moved through the traffic lanes, the first drops of the scheduled rain began to fall. The entertainment district's weather management system triggered these nightly downpours at precisely this hour, part atmosphere, part marketing, ensuring the sector always looked appropriately cinematic for the nightlife crowds and cameras. Anakin extended his left arm beyond the window, letting the artificial precipitation run through his fingers. The infinite constellation of lights stretched in every direction, each one a life he'd never have to live, a struggle he'd never know. Everything was movement and light and sound, music and wind washing through the cabin, the city melting into colored streams as they cut through the night air. And suddenly, brilliantly, Anakin could see it, the architecture of his happiness, revealed. Here was Barriss, who'd just executed the Force's will against 6 beings without hesitation yet, whose companionship held no calculation or agenda. The temple overflowed with such souls, beings who sought his presence not for advancement or favor, but for the simple pleasure of shared existence. Masters who genuinely delighted in his company gathered nightly to chase oblivion through crystalline powders and expensive spirits, the ancient halls serving as their haven of perpetual celebration. And Padme, who would tear apart star systems for him as readily as he would unmake galaxies for her. Their love burned with the intensity of binary stars, each making the other shine brighter, neither complete without the other's gravity. The rain was starting to fall harder now, beginning to reach Barriss. Anakin pulled his arm back through the window and enclosed her completely in his embrace, drawing her fully against him and resting his chin on her head. No reason to let her get drenched. Her warmth pressed against his chest as he felt Barriss relax completely, as if melting into him. Must be lunaweed powder on my jacket, he mused. That would explain the extreme relaxation. Up here, suspended between the planet's surface and the stars, he felt the profound symmetry of it all. The Force itself seemed to flow in harmony with his desires, an ancient power that bent reality to his whims, as though the universe existed solely to manifest his intentions. This was the sublime arithmetic of happiness, to be young and invincible in a galaxy that conspired to fulfill your every need, to float through existence, wrapped in the warm certainty that tomorrow would bring nothing but more of this eternal, golden now. He held Barriss as they flew through the rain-washed night, Coruscant alive and electric around them, carrying them forward into the glittering darkness. Back at the club, Anakin briefed Yoda on the clone intelligence findings. The Grandmaster paused mid-conversation, taking a moment to recall who this Grievous character actually was, then immediately transferred responsibility to Mace before returning to the dance floor. As Windu began making his calls, Anakin found himself puzzled by Palpatine's decision to involve them at all. By passing along the intelligence, the Chancellor had essentially handed the Order credit for Grievous's elimination. Not that Anakin was complaining, but it seemed an odd choice for someone supposedly possessing the political acumen to control an entire galaxy. Windu contacted clone intelligence first, confirming Grievous's location in Pao City, Utapo's capital, then reached out to Master Wilbom Yu, the temple's orbital bombardment specialist. Eliminate Grievous, Windu commanded over the venue's thundering base, relaying the target's coordinates and authorizing complete operational flexibility. The hideout, the building, the entire city, whatever proves necessary. Acknowledged, Yu replied, his enthusiasm unmistakable. The assignment offered ideal conditions for studying high-altitude detonation patterns, a research opportunity he had long anticipated. News of Grievous's impending elimination was celebrated with another round of premium liquor. Across the club's various screens, feeds had begun cycling through breaking news about an explosion at the galaxy's upper house, but the reports barely registered among the Jedi. Barriss appeared behind Anakin where he sat at the bar, draping her arms around his neck from behind, one hand holding her datapad with the news feed. He took it to watch the footage of emergency responders at the scene. Her grip tightened around his neck as she leaned in closer, her chin settling onto his left shoulder. He felt her turn her face into the curve of his neck, the warmth of her breath against the skin there. She must be drunk again and finding it hard to stand, Anakin thought. As the night wore on, a few masters noticed an odd sensation, something watching from the shadows between the strobing lights. Windu mentioned it to Fisto, who shrugged it off as a spice mixing badly with alcohol. Yoda felt it too, but kept dancing, attributing the feeling to the venue's atmosphere. Probably just the music and lights, someone remarked, and the moment passed. More drinks appeared, and the peculiar feeling faded into the background noise of their celebration. The morning of the Galactic Bachelor finale arrived with dawn painting Monument Plaza in golden light. A 5-member Gorman band was concluding their performance on the central stage, each musician wearing helmets with horns resembling the pack animals their group was named after. Their synchronized movements echoed the creatures' hunting behaviors as sophisticated audio engineering amplified their performance across the venue. As their closing notes thundered through the floating seating tiers, 3 pristine Jedi Council shuttles descended in perfect formation toward the event's exclusive Jedi landing complex, a section reserved solely for the Order, positioned even beyond the VIP areas where senators and corporate executives were relegated. The gleaming vessels of polished gold caught the morning sun and reflected it back like fallen stars, their ethereal radiance making them appear less like aircraft and more like divine manifestations descending from the heavens. The performance's conclusion triggered specialized pyrotechnics across the massive venue, enormous bursts of brilliant silver fire that bloomed like molten Durasteel flowers against the bright morning sky. The metallic flames burned with such intensity that spectators instinctively flinched, expecting showers of superheated fragments. But no debris fell. Instead, the flashes appeared blinding against the morning light, their radiance fierce enough to trigger afterimages across the venue's closer seating tiers. When observers closed their eyes against the glare, the true artistry revealed itself, cascades of vivid color blooming behind their eyelids, electric greens, deep purples, brilliant oranges. The secondary display varied by distance and individual sensitivity, but the general effect held. Open eyes saw metallic fire, closed eyes witnessed bursts of pure color. The specialized compounds were engineered to optimize this retinal response within the amphitheater's primary viewing zones, calibrated to remain within safe exposure thresholds. The Jedi gazed from their shuttle with expressions ranging from impressed to mildly intrigued, blinking to watch the display transform from blazing light to cascading color and back again. As their craft settled onto the landing platform, the Council, Ahsoka, who had taken a brief holiday from her Mandalore executions, Barriss, and several other Jedi disembarked into the restricted zone where broadcast drones were prohibited. The group wore designer formal wear that cost more than most beings' annual salaries, ensuring they'd look appropriately elegant when their moment came. Distant cameras were undoubtedly capturing their arrival from the legal perimeter, but the footage would be too grainy to matter. After 3 years of strategic cameo appearances before the show's format change, the Council Masters were saving their grand entrance for the main ceremony when they'd take the stage as planned. For now, the entire group simply wanted to reach the building's interior without fanfare. As the group moved toward the entrance, Mace's comlink chimed with a priority transmission. Grievous's severed head filled the display, accompanied by Master Wilbom Bue's characteristically efficient report. Target eliminated, Separatist garrison neutralized, Pao City evacuated, and subjected to 26 consecutive orbital bombardments to ensure operational completeness. Mace didn't question why 26 bombardments were necessary for a dead target, partly because he knew Bue's obsession with large explosions, but mostly because he couldn't be bothered to care. The other masters noticed Windu standing by the shuttle, staring at his datapad, and approached warily, expecting some crisis to interrupt their entertainment. Grievous is dead, Windu explained without preamble. The Chancellor requires notification. Not our job. We are officially off duty, Kit Fisto replied, as others nodded in agreement. Jocasta's perpetually eager for operational involvement, Shakti suggested. This satisfies her complaints about exclusion from strategic decisions. Tell her to handle Palpatine. Mace agreed and activated his comm. The call connected after several rings. Master Nu, we need you to update the Chancellor on the Grievous situation. He's dead. Forwarding details now. The proper way to start a comm call is with a greeting, Master Windu. When are you going to learn basic etiquette? Came the sharp reply. Apologies, Master. We're short on time. Will you take this news to the Chancellor's office representing the Jedi? Nu barely glanced away from her library terminal, where an online sabacc game demanded most of her attention. Fine, I'll make this... She paused to play a card. Sacrifice. Though I'd rather spend my time doing literally anything else. There was a brief pause before Shakti added helpfully, Come on, Master Nu. You can sit around and discuss how you both survived the Rakatan invasion. I'd rather tell him stories about how you tried to run away from the temple when you were 8 after losing a practice duel, Master T. Nu replied before hanging up. What? Shakti exclaimed, caught completely off guard. Call her back, Mace. Patience, Master. This can wait. Let's not ruin this occasion because of Master Nu's attitude. And honestly, who hasn't tried to run away as a child? I certainly have. Master Fisto has. And Anakin did it constantly. Anakin nodded, laughing. It was absolutely true. Yes. Deal with Nu later you can. Find Obi-Wan we must. Time to go it is, Yoda declared. They headed for the entrance, escorted by security personnel who seemed appropriately intimidated by the galaxy's most famous religious celebrities. As they walked through the corridors, several masters, Anakin, Mace, Fisto, Teen, and Kolar, felt a vague unease, a restlessness they couldn't quite place. The sensation was easily dismissed as excitement for the upcoming finale. In the Chancellor's office, Palpatine's fingers pressed against his desk's polished surface. The patterns he'd spent decades weaving were unraveling, reality itself refusing to follow his grand design. Anakin should have been here, should have been standing before him, teetering on the precipice between light and darkness, ready to embrace his destiny. Instead, the chosen one was attending a game show. 3 levels below, in the Senate Executive Building's diplomatic wing, Senator Amidala stood apart from her allies, outside Conference Hall 7. Her colleagues clustered near the entrance, voices lowered in the usual murmur of political operatives killing time. Padme's attention fixed on Baron Valen Rudor Kenth Hammertong III of House Maltera Vos Keldanis, whose ancient form occupied a repulsor chair positioned between the hall's entrance and his retinue. The conference couldn't begin. The Baron had succumbed to sleep, his mouth agape, medical tubes snaking from various ports in his withered frame like technological parasites keeping death at bay. Padme studied him with an expression that revealed nothing, arms crossed above her pronounced abdomen, her senatorial robes flowing loosely around her form. Dorme approached, her mouth already opening to suggest using one of the available chairs, but Padme spoke first, without turning. How exactly are we supposed to talk to that? Like a normal person, I suppose, Dorme offered pragmatically. Normal? Padme's gaze never left the Baron. Look at him. Nothing about any of this is normal. They maintained conversational volume, professional smiles intact for any watching eyes. He had heart replacement surgery last week, Dorme explained, hence the tubes. Apparently he's quite sharp when conscious. She regarded the ancient noble with characteristic empathy, that gentle concern she extended to all suffering creatures, the same quality that made her hair-trigger rage so jarring to those few who had witnessed it and lived to remember. Heart replacement? At 102? Padme's voice carried dark amusement. I thought Bale was joking. How long can you run from your fate, dear Baron? Dorme's disapproval radiated silently. The Baron's heir apparent, his great-great-grandson, stood among the advisors, receiving whispered instructions from a thin middle-aged man whose hands moved in precise, nervous gestures. The heir was a man in his mid-20s who looked closer to 40. Bale had mentioned this one during their preparation briefings, ambitious to a fault, openly resentful of the old Baron's longevity, and despised by most of the extended family for his transparent greed. Padme and her allies had already identified him as their contingency plan. If the old man proved too stubborn to negotiate with, they'd simply remove the obstacle and work with his replacement instead. During her tenure as queen, such complications would have resolved themselves far more efficiently. Padme missed the clarity of those simpler days, when watching rivals discover the consequences of standing in her path had provided its own satisfaction. Padme assessed the contemptible heir, then glanced back at the unconscious Baron. Why waste time with drawn-out negotiations when the solution stood right there? They had planned this as backup, but perhaps it was time to expedite matters. Padme moved toward them, Dorme trailing, already recognizing the calculated purpose in her approach. After perfunctory introductions, Padme requested a private word with the heir. They stepped away from the others, finding a pocket of space near the corridor's bend, where architectural acoustics created a dead zone for eavesdroppers. Dorme positioned herself to observe while maintaining plausible distance. Padme's questions came with casualness, inquiring about the succession, why this particular descendant stood as heir when surely others existed. The man explained something about disinheritance, broken marriage contracts, family traditions violated. Padme's attention had already moved past his words. She indicated the emergency stairwell 20 meters down the corridor. "Listen, see that stairwell? No surveillance coverage there. Why don't you just move his chair over there and—" Her hands made a slight pushing gesture, miming a hoverchair's unfortunate descent. "You'll be the Baron, and this agreement will be resolved in a few hours as opposed to—" She looked back at the old Baron sleeping in his chair, then back at him. "Weeks? Months? Years? What are you suggesting, Senator?" he asked. "I'm suggesting my time has value." Her tone remained conversational, almost pleasant. "I'm suggesting that negotiating with someone who requires medical machinery to maintain basic consciousness tests my patience. I'm suggesting you demonstrate the leadership qualities your family presumably values. I'm suggesting that accidents happen in old buildings with poor maintenance records. And I'm suggesting that grief passes quickly when inheritance suits it." She turned away, but her peripheral vision caught his glance toward the stairwell, the calculation already beginning behind his eyes. Dorme shook her head minutely as Padme returned. "What?" Padme mouthed, her innocence perfectly crafted. The Baron's eyes fluttered open, consciousness returning. His advisors immediately announced readiness to proceed. A servant in ceremonial golden armor guided the Baron's repulsor chair toward the conference hall, the delegation filing behind them, the heir's gaze moving between Padme and his ancestor's frail form as they walked. As Padme crossed the threshold, the taste of ash bloomed across her tongue, acrid and sudden. "Is anyone in here smoking?" she asked Dorme. "No," Dorme said, looking around then at Padme, very concerned. Padme's shoulders lifted in the faintest shrug as she entered the hall. The door's magnetic seals engaged behind them with a soft hiss, locking them into whatever negotiations awaited within.